Ladies and gentlemen, welcome today to the show. Today we have Francisco Litvay. Francisco comes from a tech background. He's graduated in business informatics. At 17, he immigrated from Brazil, and at 21, became a digital nomad. He has a lot to share about this. Having already been in more than 30 countries on 4 continents, he's the co-founder of Settee, a company specialized in flag theory, free zones, and charter cities. This gentleman over here has a well of knowledge, and you're going to love this episode. Francisco, how are you?
I'm great, Mikel. Glad to be here. We're cross guesting each other. You just joined our podcast in Portuguese earlier this week. Now I'm here and we're talking in English. Just a pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
Yes. Man, since I started consuming your content, I was like, wow, he's like face of a 20-something-year-old, but he's like 40 or 50 already in his mind. You are a well of knowledge. How did it all start? Like, how did you put all this flag theory, charter cities, everything in your mind? What was the journey?
Okay, so I originally was very much into this libertarianism, Austrian School of Economics, free market stuff as a teen, right, as I was in school and so on. And that continued into my university years. I left Brazil after my school to study in Austria. Did my bachelor's there in business informatics, was originally more into the IT side of things. And there I got into contact with some ideas related to free cities and special economic zones and autonomous regions, those kinds of things. And because I was in Austria, I actually was well situated to join an organization called, by then, the Free Private Cities Foundation. Nowadays, it's just Free Cities Foundation, which was looking for someone who was well versed into these topics, interested in that kind of thing, and that spoke German and English. And I was like, all right, awesome. This is exactly me, right? I know all these things. And through that, I met a gentleman called Christoph Heuermann, who is the founder of Stadt, who in the German-speaking world is basically the, like Andrew Henderson, right? He's been into all the big-time newspapers and TV shows, Galileo in Germany. So in the German-speaking world, if you're talking flag theory, he's a staple name. And I started devouring his blog content, and we had this connection because he was an ambassador. He still is an ambassador to the Free Cities Foundation. These projects are all things he supports a lot, and we're both passionate about that. And that's how we got to meet and talk. And I was just reading his content on my own because I wanted to apply it as well for myself. Like, I always was interested then in these different places to live and move and nomadism and so on. And then at some point, I realized, like, I looked at his website and I saw that he had websites in German, in English, in French, in Spanish, in Russian, and none in Portuguese. And I was, wait a second, Chris, there's 205 million Brazilians out there, and most of them, if you ask any Brazilian on the street, there's a part that says, no, I love Brazil, I would never leave. And the other half is like, oh my God, please, yes, I want to go to Europe. I want to go to, I don't know, somewhere else. Take me from here. And I pitched him, like, did you ever consider doing a website like this in Portuguese? And he tells me, well, yeah, actually, this is basically done as a franchise. Like, I have partners for each of the languages, but so far I haven't been able to find anyone who wanted to follow through with Portuguese. So I reached out to him. We did this partnership. He helped train me with a lot of his knowledge and gave me access to all of his basically personal contacts and VIP info. And then I started Settee, which is basically the Portuguese version of Staatlos, right? So basically all his content that he was producing since 2015 in German, we translated and had to adapt it, of course, to Portuguese, because the situation in the EU and Brazil is very different. And that's a topic we can delve into later as well. But that was the gist of it. So originally going to Germany, going to Austria, getting into these libertarian circles, that kind of overlap with flag theory a lot, right? A lot of these people in the space are more free market oriented and international oriented.
Totally. And the spark for traveling, because 17 years old and you're already like emigrated from Brazil, started traveling. How was that?
Oh yeah, so
that breakthrough that I'm going to travel?
Okay, so in Brazil, we finished school at 17, right? Now, actually, we don't anymore because they increased another year into public school. But anyway, I finished school at 17. And since the beginning of my high school, I had it in my mind that I don't want to study in Brazil. I want to study abroad. I come from Blumenau, and I lived in Pomerode, like the two most German cities in Brazil, out of them all. Like if you're ever in Brazil in October, definitely go down to our Oktoberfest. Highly recommend. In any case, I come from this area of Brazil. I had German in school for 9 years. My grandpa is Austrian, so I have the Austrian citizenship as well. And he also always incentivized me to learn German. I was always like kind of immersed in this Brazilian, but also more German influenced culture. And I had it to myself that, if I don't use this language knowledge, I'm just going to lose it, right? I already see a lot of people who, oh yeah, they learned a lot in school or whatever, but if you don't practice it, it's not going to ingrain itself in you. So I always had in my mind, I want to do my bachelor's, I want to do my university in German, somewhere where I can do that. So yeah, that was the spark, right? Since the beginning of high school, I was already preparing and planning. And my last year of high school was basically just going after documents and inquiring with universities in Austria, like how the hell do you even make this work to go from Brazil to Austria? What are the bureaucracies that you have to go through to make this work? And one thing that I learned on that process, which I tell my friends all the time as well, is studying in Europe is not hard. Like if you compare it to Brazil, Brazilian public universities, the ones we had nearby, every single year you have like 2 months of strikes because they didn't pay the salaries of the teachers and that kind of thing. And then you have to, during your vacations be studying, and it's a complete logistic mess. And in the private universities, you're paying more than what you pay in Europe. In terms of if you go to a European public uni, you still have to pay as a Brazilian. But if you're in a private uni in Brazil, it's more expensive than studying in Europe. So, why not just go and study there for a couple of years and have an international experience?
Totally. So you travel there. Actually, you have multiple citizenship. That's also worth mentioning as well, right? You mentioned it somewhere else.
Brazilian, Austrian.
Which gives you even more freedom, open borders, visa-free traveling, and you explored 30 countries, 4 continents. Like, what's the highlight of each continent? Which part of each one you would say, wow, that was like one of my best memories? Because it must be very different one from another, right? Because people say, I travel a lot, Paraguay, Brazil, it's pretty much the same, but 4 continents. Tell us more.
Okay, so there's continents that I know more, there's continents I know less. The one I know the most is actually Europe, because in my 4 years of Europe, I was able to, like 5 years of Europe, actually, I was able to travel a lot inside. Traveling within Europe is quite cheap and easy and so on. In terms of favorite countries, if I were thinking about living in Europe, I would say Portugal and Hungary. Those were my 2 favorites by a good margin. I would say Budapest is just amazing, fantastic city to live in. And also my months in the Lisbon area. I didn't live inside Lisbon. I lived in Cascais, which is like 1 hour from Lisbon. If you take a train, you're right there. If you want to go there on the weekends and do stuff, but during your day-to-day, you're 5 minutes from the beach in a sunny place where everything is clean and nice and good looking. So that was also a definitely highlight. In terms of So that's Europe continent number 1. North America, I've been only once to the US for 2 weeks. Don't have much experience there, just Colorado, which I really liked. First time snowboarding, all those kinds of things. Africa was definitely more eventful. I've been to 2 countries over there, São Tomé and Príncipe, which is a Portuguese-speaking country, an island of about 200,000. and I've been to Morocco, and both were super unique experiences. I would say São Tome personally left a big impression on me because at the same time it's completely different, and it's sub-Saharan Africa, so ethnically everyone is completely different from me. Like it's not like Brazil where everyone's kind of mixed and you have a lot of that. No, like in terms of mixed or white population, it's like, I don't know, like less than 5%. So everyone looks at me and they know I'm not from over there. It's a weird thing where like they immediately, okay, yeah, he's not from here. But at the same time, when I go talk to them and I'm talking in Portuguese, they immediately like, oh, wow, you're from Brazil. Oh, we love Brazil, and we watch they watch our novellas, the soap operas, and there's a lot of similar foods as well, like tropical fruits from the Amazon region and from the Atlantic rainforest that we have over here. The Portuguese planted over there as well. So all the fruits that I'm used to in Brazil that I didn't find in Europe, I found them in São Tome. And it's a weird experience where there's so much similarity from the culture and the language, while at the same time it's a very different environment, and they also have their own particular stuff. So that left a big impression on me. That's something I would definitely recommend a visit for you as well, since you've already been in Brazil for a while, to see the difference. And yeah, and in the Americas, I lived in Brazil for like 17 years. I have traveled almost nothing in LATAM. I've been only to Uruguay for a couple of weeks, and now I'm in Colombia, right? This year and next year, I'm focusing on LATAM because there's just so much here I don't know, right? I've only been once to Ciudad del Este to buy cheap stuff, which is what all Brazilians do on their, once or twice a year, you go to Ciudad del Este, buy the cheap electronics and come back. That's the typical Brazil experience. And so for LATAM, I want to focus here more on the coming years.
Nice. So we've got Europe that you mentioned, Portugal and Hungary, Budapest. We have Africa. We have LATAM. What's the fourth continent?
North America, if you count like that. Okay. Or Turkey, that counts as Asia, but I don't know. I haven't been to the Asian side of Istanbul, so I don't think I can count that as Asia.
Okay, but you've been to Turkey and North America as well. Yeah, cool. So a diverse experience, and this year focusing on Latin America, which is funny. It's people from Europe want to go to Latin America, people from Latin America want to go to Europe, and we are all crossing the globe, man.
Yeah, and no, go ahead. This is an interesting thing, right? I recently did a poll with our audience at Settee, which is like 90% Brazilian, and among other things, I asked, like, if you're planning on moving abroad or becoming a nomad, where do you want to go? And I think like 60-something% wanted to go to either Canada, US, Europe, right? And very little wanted to go to Southeast Asia or LATAM or Africa. LATAM was the third biggest because there's a good amount that want to go to Paraguay or Uruguay or Panama. These are the big three when it comes to Brazilians wanting to move within LATAM. But besides that, it's mostly just, I'll go to Portugal, I'll go to Spain, I'll go to Germany. I don't know.
Yes, right. They want to feel like home. The people from Blumenau, they want to feel like home, and they go to Germany, right? All right. So I know that this is really valuable. This is the first thing. When you travel, you have this hands-on experience, this real-life experience, because you have multiple guides. You have, the ones in English, and that you are the responsible translating them to Portuguese. You have the one on banking, the one on what else we have here on nomadism, offshore companies, residencies and immigration, citizenship, miles, and now going to hotel programs that is going to be released afterwards, right? So what is something that, let's go step by step in each one of these topics. We can start with citizenship. What's something that you studied, something that when you did it in real life, also being a holder of 2 passports right now, what's something that people are not getting, and something that it's like the elephant in the room, something that is really important to take into account when you do, for example, your consultations that people can book? What's something you always take into account when you think about citizenships?
Okay, so in the Brazilian, and I think in the LATAM and US context as well, I think people are too quick to disregard the options by descent and they go too fast on, oh yeah, what are the options to invest like $200,000 in the Caribbean, or what are the countries where I only have to live there for less than 5 years to get a citizenship, when there's a number of citizenship programs that are not limited by the number of generations, right? So okay, Spain is limited by generations, Portugal is limited by generations, but Italy, for example, is not. And Germany and Poland, for example, they have their complexities and additional requirements, but also, you can manage it even if it's not your grandpa, but someone like 4 generations ago, 5 generations ago. Hungary, for example, as well, right? So that's something we've been recommending a lot to our consultancy clients. Do a genealogical research, right? We've actually partnered up with some jurists, some lawyers here in Brazil who are specialized on this end, and like finding the birth certificates and the immigration records and these kinds of things, because just in terms of opportunity costs, right? Okay, as a Latin American, you only have to live 2 years in Spain to get the citizenship there, for example. But what's your opportunity cost of getting into the Spanish bureaucracy, paying the Spanish taxes for 2 years, having to exit the Spanish tax system after you're a citizen already, which is another completely different matter, to just going after those documents and seeing if you have the right? Because sometimes there's people who think they have no right, and they end up having rights to multiple citizenships. I have the Austrian one, but when we decided to dig deeper, I found out that I would also have the right to the Italian and the Hungarian one if I would actually go after it. That's not something I'm doing right now, because basically Austria and Germany are a pain in the ass when you want to get additional citizenships. You have to make a formal request and pay that and so on. So not something I'm going after right now.
Yeah.
But that's a possibility, something that I would not find out had I not looked for it. Right, so that is an important thing. Then there's the question of the blocks. I think that is very important. These associations of countries, basically, and how they grant you more freedom, right? So, for example, if you're getting a Panama citizenship, that will give you something nice. It's a good passport and so on. But Panama doesn't have these big like immigration agreements, right? Like you have in Mercosur, like you have in CARICOM, like you have in the CPLP, the Portuguese-speaking countries, or that you have in the EU, right? I think these, as much as we might hate on these big blocks for being bureaucratic and protectionistic and a force for regulation, they do give you a real practical freedom, which is, okay, as a Brazilian, I have the right to move to any South American country, basically, with the exception of, I don't know, French Guiana. But if I wanted to go to Uruguay or Argentina or etc., because I'm Brazilian, I don't need a job offer, I don't need an investment, I don't need qualifications, I don't need to open a company, I just go, right? The same level of freedom that Europeans have in the EU, we have in South America. And so I think finding citizenships from these blocks not only grants you a plan B, but already a plan C and D in case things go south.
Totally. And how do you start with the investigation, right, of your descent? Like, how do you advise it to clients who are curious, saying, well, besides asking your parents, like, do you know if my grandparents or great grandparents are from somewhere? Let's say in case somebody don't have access to their parents or grandparents to ask for that, or they just want to ensure that this is legit, this is real information they are giving them, or that they are missing something that would grant them access to 1 or 2 passports. What's something they can do?
Okay, here I'm going to give a bit more the example in Brazil. I'm not sure exactly how it works in the US, but at least with our genealogist partners here. So number one, asking your family is the easiest and fastest option. If they have the certificate somewhere in your grandma's attic and so on, that certainly helps. Then you also have these online ancestry services, which are a great deal very accurate, at least when it comes to the names of the persons, and sometimes also the birth location and year, which already helps locate these sorts of things. But then you have to start getting creative, right? So in Brazil, for example, you go to the ports. You usually have a room where they have like these old books from the 19th century and the 20th century stating the records of everyone who entered the port, right? So you can go do it for yourself, or you can hire someone to do it, but actually go there and browse the pages. Like if you ask, they let you browse the pages of these very old books and go name by name to see if you can find the name of your ancestor. And here, he entered Brazil. We have the proof, right? And then you also have the process in the country of ancestry, right? You can also ask for the churches and the notaries and etc. in Italy, in Portugal, in Germany, and these places, because they usually have the records from the birth or from the marriage or from the death of some of these ancestors. So that is the part where I would say our service from the genealogical search helps the most, because our jurists, we already have people in each of these countries. So, if you wanted to do this on your own, you'd actually have to fly it over to Germany or wherever, or, try to communicate with them by email. Whereas you already have people on site, which can, just go there and they're already on the region. So I would say these are the main avenues, right? So first, direct contact as much as you can with your own family, then online searches as well. Then in the countries where they immigrated to, go to the notaries, go to the churches, go to the ports where they entered. And then on the countries where they left, also go to the ports from where they left, and also the notaries and the churches. That's usually where these things are.
Yes, because usually it can go back to what, 1850s? Like what like, do you know of any case of people of the 1800s or 1900s? I don't know how back it can go. Do you have that info? Or what's the craziest you've known about?
So Pomerode, the city where I lived most of my life, this German town in Brazil, was founded in 1863, right? So that's when the first German immigrants came and founded the city. The Italy case, it's quite common for it to go way back, because officially you can get the citizenship as long as it's from a descendant that was a citizen of Italy as a country, right? So in the unification period, so from 1861 onwards, but also before it became like the full peninsula, you already had like the kingdom. So that is where you may get disqualified, for example, in the Italian case, because it came from a part of Italy that was not yet incorporated into the kingdom by that time. Anyway, but it can go really, really far. Like really 19th century happens quite a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And the last one on citizenship, well, last two on citizenship, because are really requested on Twitter as well. We are both active on Twitter, and we get these two. The first one is about, does the person, for example, your grandparent, right? We were talking that as well on the Portuguese podcast the other day with Danilo. We're talking about, what if the grandparent naturalized there but was not born there? Does the grandson have access to that? So for example, we in our lifetime, right, we start citizenship by investment in the Caribbean, and one in Turkey and one here and that. In 10 years, both of us, we have 5 or 6 passports, let's say, but we were born in just one country, right? So how does that affect the next generations?
Yeah, so usually these, because we have these two principles, right? The jus solis and the jus sanguinis. Jus sanguinis being passed down by descent, by blood. The jus solis being by being born in a given territory. But if you look at the jus solis countries, like basically all of the Americas, they have this rule that if you're born there, you get the citizenship. They also have jus sanguinis dispositions. So in Brazil, if you're the son of a Brazilian citizen, then you're also Brazilian, even if you're not born in Brazilian soil. So you theoretically can stack them up as much as you want. And I know a friend of mine, who will not name here, but he has 4 citizenships by birth only, because both of his parents were dual nationals. The only problem you get is when you start getting into these dispositions that either restrict dual nationality or that make it harder to acquire additional nationalities, like Germany and Austria have. Or in this case, the case of this friend of mine, one of his 4 nationalities is American. So he has to pay taxes to the US, even though he never set foot there, because one of his parents was American and decided to give him the citizenship. So in this case, it's both a blessing and a curse, because he doesn't live in the US. He doesn't care about the US, but he still has to file US taxes because he's a citizen. So
crazy.
Yeah.
But he was born with 4 passports, something like that. Crazy. And really good. We can search for those keywords to know if it's by living there, by being born there, by the parents That's great stuff. And the other one is, what citizenships are you looking into? Or if you want to make it less personal, which ones still sound interesting to you? We can call it that way. Citizenships in, let's say, the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, so as I said again, in my case, because I have the Austrian, I have to really think on what I'm going to do, because from the German-speaking world, if you want to acquire an additional citizenship, you have to do something that's called a Beibehaltungsantrag. You have to send a request for them to accept the fact that you're going to get a citizenship. And if they don't grant it to you and you naturalize anyway, you lose the Austrian-German one. And we've already seen cases of clients who, he bought a Sanguinis CBI, and when he wanted to renew his German passport, the German consulate said, "What do you mean? You're not German?" Because he took it away because he didn't do the Beibehaltungsantrag. So that is a real danger. So if I were to get another citizenship that is outside of the EU, I would first want to guarantee another EU citizenship, right? So like, if I ever wanted to naturalize, I don't know, in Colombia or Panama or etc., I would first try to go for another European citizenship by descent, because I do not want to lose the benefits of Europe, because Europe is a big draw, right? In terms of what I'm interested in, there's something really cool about being Latino that some people don't know, is that Latin countries are really nice to each other when it comes to naturalization. So, for example, in Spain, if you're Latin, you can naturalize in only 2 years. In Colombia, if you're Latin, you can naturalize in 1 year. In Panama, if you're Latin, you can naturalize in the amount of time it takes for a Panamanian to get naturalized in your country, which is a really cool principle. So, for example, normally in Panama, it takes 5 years, but Panamanians can naturalize in Brazil in 4 years, which means that I would take 4 years in Panama if I decided to live there. So, yeah, I would mostly be looking for something that is not Mercosur or EU to grant additional diversification, but I'm not going to live for multiple years in a country just because of the citizenship, or actually want to be there because I actually like being there. So I want to get to know some of the other Latin countries, because again, I haven't spent time there. So this year I'm going to Panama. This year I'm going to a couple other Latin countries, Venezuela, Paraguay, Argentina, etc. And then next year, probably Mexico as well. And then I'll see if there's a country I really like. I'll probably get residency and start counting time for a citizenship there. But I also think the CE4 is interesting, like the small free movement block you have in Central America, because El Salvador is really promising at the moment, and Honduras, if they do not repeal the ZETI law, which we still have to see in the upcoming months, but that is also looking like a really promising place as well, right? Roatan and Morazan, etc.
Totally. And yeah, I was also looking into what African passport citizenship would be the most interesting one. Do you have an answer for that? Like, have you looked into any African citizenship?
So the thing with African citizenship is that most of them kind of suck. Even the best ones, they still suck. Like you look at the South African one or Mauritius one, etc. None of them are really strong, but even the weaker ones, like Tome, I remember searching this when I was there. It would grant me access to like an additional, I think, 6 countries that I don't have access to as a Brazilian or as an Austrian, because it's basically just African countries that grant access to each other. So if you're someone who's interested in Africa and traveling within Africa a lot, then an African passport can make sense, right? But I'm not really looking much into that part of the world at the moment, at least as a place to live, right? Even the Portuguese-speaking countries, if you look at Angola or Mozambique or Cape Verde, etc., the connection to Brazil is still quite bad, right? All of the, if you're looking to base up in Europe, Portugal is a really interesting place, because they have direct flights to all of these Portuguese-speaking African countries, right? Mozambique, Angola, Cape Verde, São Tome, Guinea-Bissau, etc. You don't have these connections from any other place in Europe, right? Lisbon is the one place where you can fly to all these countries at the same time. And Portugal has double taxation treaties with all these countries, right? So investor protections and less withholding taxes and all of these things. That is a unique position that Lisbon has, right? So while Lisbon does not own these countries as it used to in the past as part of the colonial empire, there's still a lot of relations and economic connections that you have between them. So if you're someone who's looking to be entrepreneurial in Africa, especially in Portuguese Africa, I think Lisbon is a very interesting base. And I know people who are exactly into these segments, right? If you look at the elites in São Tome, for example, all of them own houses in Portugal, and all of them travel frequently to Portugal. Their kids study in Portugal, etc., and then they do business in São Tome or in Angola or Cape Verde, right? So the lifestyle base and the stability, safety base, and then the places where you go to do your business or be part of a UN mission or whatever.
Totally. And something that you mentioned is, which I agree, is the citizenship. Don't live in a country just for a citizenship, and that's something that's very sound advice. Also, like CVI programs. We were talking about this with David Klefecker on another episode. What's the point of investing 150K to 100K if you don't have other parts of the flag theory set up? Like you have 6 to 12 months of cash reserve and gold and silver or crypto and real estate. It's like there's a hype around passports, but there are other things that are important besides citizenships. And here it's one of your other guides, which is residencies and immigration. When you think about those words, or after translating those guides, what's something valuable you can think of, or something that it's usually misunderstood and is like, hey, I see it like this?
I think one of the things that have me, and also with the consultancies that I've realized, is this really no one size fits all. You have countries for different kinds of people, right? And in all aspects, if you think about it, like for example, in tax-wise, the non-dom countries like Malta, like even the UK, Ireland, or Mauritius, etc., they're very interesting if you have like capital gains from abroad, if you have foreign passive income in basically all of its kinds, but they usually suck if you have local income. They usually suck if you have a local company, right? If you're in the UK and you're earning a salary or you're having a local business, then you're going to be taxed up to 40%. But if you're a big investor with foreign money, then wow, that's actually quite tax attractive. Or you have countries, like same thing with the territorial countries, right? Like Panama, like Paraguay, like Uruguay, etc. If your income is from abroad, then it's really good. If your income is local, then usually not so good. And there's also a lot of these, I don't know, like hidden gems or countries that people don't usually look to as being tax attractive, but they actually are, right? For example, Brazil. Brazil is horrible if you're a big company trying to do business and trying to do foreign remittances and all these kinds of things. But if you're just a guy who has foreign clients or you want to invest abroad, Brazil is still quite good, right? I get a lot of my clients who they want to move to Europe and they're paying about like, I don't know, between 5 to 15% of taxes. And when I look at them and tell them, yeah, like, Portugal that you want to go to, that would be 20%. Or Spain, you want to go there? Yeah, like minimum with the Nomad visa, it's going to be 15% plus social security. And they're all like, wait a second. You're actually not paying that much in tax in Brazil.
Yeah.
If you're in the simplified regime or if you have a foreign holding company. And that's another big point to be aware of, right? These effective management rules and the CFC rules, because all of the developed world, if you look at basically the entire EU, with the exception of Cyprus or the US or Canada or Australia or etc., they all have these rules where you can't just have an offshore company for your investments, because if the company is being effectively managed from your place of residence, then it's going to be taxed there still. Right. And a lot of people don't get this principle. They think like, yeah, I'm going to move to, I don't know, Germany. I'm going to move to France. I'm going to open a US LLC, and that LLC is tax-free. And then I'm only going to pay tax when I bring the money to myself. No, pal, that's not how it's going to work. Because if the company is incorporated, I don't know if it's a US LLC or incorporated in Panama, but you're the only director, the only shareholder, the only person who does anything for the company. You don't have any employees. You don't have any offices. You don't have any directors in the country of incorporation. your tax hell is going to look at you and it's going to say, okay, so this company is incorporated in the BVI, but it's being effectively managed from Spain or from France. So it's going to pay the local corporate tax, and that's it, right? So you're not going to escape the taxes by just opening a shelf company, opening a ghost company.
Yeah.
But some countries like Brazil don't have these rules yet. So if you live in Brazil, like, you have so many people who have an offshore company in the BVIs for their investments in crypto, for their investments in stocks, and etc. And until now, there's currently a law project to end this, but it hasn't been passed yet. It's still under discussion. But until now, Brazil doesn't care. They really only tax the money when it's brought to you as an individual. As long as it stays in the company, you're tax-free. So, that is something that slips under the radar, right? People see the official, like the headline rates for corporate tax and see, oh, Brazil, 34%. Wow, that is a hell. I'm never going there. But in reality, most cases, as an individual, as a sole entrepreneur, you pay way less than you would pay in Europe.
Totally. And especially from Brazil, piggybacking on this, working with lawyers and accountants here in Brazil, they told me something I put here on fire. They told me in Brazil, and you let me know if you agree, in Brazil, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. You can do the same thing in different ways. It's going to trigger different tax outcomes or legal outcomes. There are many ways to circumnavigate, let's say, the law in Brazil.
Yeah, because that is a thing. Like, if you look at our tax law, it is one of the most complicated in the world. You always have these these charts that are published by these think tanks in Brazil, etc. Like how many hours it takes per year for a company to do their accounting and bookkeeping, etc. And it's like, okay, Estonia is down here, Chile is down here, then it goes up. Then you have something like Argentina, which is already hell, and then you see Brazil, which is like 2-3 times more, right? So the tax law here is extremely complicated. But you have these, for example, the simplified regime, which, if your turnover is under about $900,000 per year, and you're a resident in Brazil, don't forget that, you got to be a resident in Brazil, then they unify like 10 different taxes into a single tax on your gross turnover, and you pay that, and okay, that's it, right? So it's super complicated, but if you're still small or somewhat small, you can still pay an okay amount, or just use a foreign company and don't bring that money. Just bring the money that you need to live in Brazil and keep the rest abroad. That's a solid recommendation most of the time.
Totally. Yes. I'm thinking about other loopholes that I learned about Brazil and things you can do with crypto and things you can do with offshore companies and foundations.
Yeah.
Somewhere else in Panama,
buying property in
here.
Brazil and not like having to tax the money you bring in because it's capitalized as a subsidiary, right? Like, you can buy a property in Brazil through a foreign company if you open a local subsidiary, you do a capital incorporation, and then on that money you don't have to pay taxes when you're bringing it all in. So there's a number of like small loopholes that Brazil offers.
Yes, or you like have the property here, you have the company over here, and this company owns this property, so you sell this company that comes with the property outside of the Brazilian territory, like for example with an LLC in the US, things like that. So pretty interesting. Yeah, it's the capital incorporation that you mentioned. It's full of loopholes. It's definitely something very attractive for the ones full of complexity like we do. Yeah.
And I guess like the other last point is just on this encyclopedia, I've just found countries that I now want to visit them because of their tax systems and how much freedom they offer, both economically and in other means, right? Because that encyclopedia, it basically is on a good part on taxes, but it also covers other freedoms like guns or homeschooling or other kinds of things, which are other factors that, again, like taxes is not the only thing that is a big important factor. It's not just about taxes. Don't base your life around taxes. There's, your quality of life matters more. And I see that like day to day with clients. They want to live in islands because it's more remote and they want a chill, quiet life. Some clients would never live in islands because they want the action. There's what people rank as important is very different, and there's not a one size fits all.
100%. And usually what I think about the rule of thumb is, one, get your tax right. Like, for example, going to Paraguay, which is super simple. You go there, you pay 0% taxes on worldwide income while living somewhere else in the world. You don't need to live there. Just like get your tax right. And then the residencies, like in places you actually want to live. Because what if in the future, like some countries restrict access during a certain period of time, similar to what happened during the pandemic, to just residents, and you want to live in that country, you better have right now the residency before they close the doors to tourists. So that can be one. I'm curious, what are the countries, the names that you mentioned after reading the encyclopedia that got your attention, that you haven't visited yet?
Mauritius is one
Okay.
in Africa. Like when you look at it, it really sounds super interesting because they have a population that is very diverse, something that we also have in Brazil. Like they have descendants of the British, the French, they have Africans, they have Indians, they have Arabs. So it's a population that is super diverse. At the same time, they have a higher income level than Brazil. I think a fifth of the homicide rate, and way more economic freedom and tax freedom. And from also what I've talked to a German guy who's living there, everything works well. Like the country runs smoothly, and the tax system I think is just ideal. Like I think more countries should be like Mauritius. Like there's a couple countries that really refine their tax systems to be fair, I would say. I think Mauritius is one of them. I think Cyprus under the non-dom program is one of them. Georgia, there's a couple ones that really, I think, got things right. Like there, you have a 15% tax on the profit as a company, or if you're individual, 15% tax on the income, which is still reasonable. But capital gains are unconditionally exempt. So either at the
Where you're talking about?
or a corporate level.
Where you are talking?
Mauritius.
Mauritius, got it.
Mauritius, exactly. And also they have this non-dom system. So if you're not a citizen there, foreign income that stays abroad is tax-free, right? So dividends, royalties, interest, whatever, as long as it's not brought into the country, it's tax-free. And I think that's fair, right? What you bring in, okay, 15%, it's still an okay rate. It's not like a 40% like in the UK. And what stays abroad is not taxed. And that makes sense. It's not the country's business. The money was not earned here. It has nothing to do with you. Why do you want to tax it?
Yeah, it sounds like Cyprus to me. Like it's a similar structure, right?
Similar concept, yeah.
In Cyprus, the dividends, for example, you can have a UK LTD or UK LLP and send dividends to yourself. In Cyprus, it's going to be 0% tax. It's pretty interesting. It's non-dom, and there are combinations. Yeah. This is what I tell people when they ask me like, what would you do differently, or what do you recommend me when I'm getting started with this? One, read encyclopedias like the ones that we are talking about. I personally read them. I have the encyclopedias that Francisco is mentioning, and they're full of knowledge. Like there are so many things that literally after 10 seconds of getting that new piece of information, it can literally shape and change the course of your life, the decisions that you make. And if you don't have that information, well, you have less power, right? And then when you take action, you can create masterpieces when it comes to sovereign plans. So number one is this. And number two, for people that have a bit more money or want to speed up the process, less time, it's like booking a consultation. Francisco does a great job with that. And it's the fastest, it's the faster. Thank you. It's the faster, the fastest way to me. Like asking somebody to be like, tailor this to me is like custom made for you, for your questions, your inquiries. Really, really like totally valuable. I highly recommend it because I had one consultation with Francisco and it was like, oh, what am I missing? Like, and boom, I go there and we start talking this. And it's like, even if you are a pro at this, you can always like bounce these ideas with other people, in this case with him, and you always get to new levels. You see things from different angles and you combine it and it's like, boom. I always say just one piece of golden nugget, it's worth the 2 hours of the consultation. So definitely recommend it. After this,
much appreciated.
After this genuine pitch of something that I did myself and I really enjoyed, happy client in here, let's talk a bit more about offshore companies. which is one of the other encyclopedias. Offshore companies. What makes a company an offshore company? Like, what gives this category of it is offshore?
There's two ways you can categorize this, right? There's the idea that, okay, offshore is off the shore, so anything that is outside of the place where you live would count as offshore. And then you have the other distinction, which is like this classic offshore jurisdictions, like, Caribbean, these countries that are distinguished by having zero tax on basically anything, little accounting requirements, little reporting requirements. You just have almost no effort, right, with these companies, compared to the onshore jurisdictions like, let's say, the EU or the US or Canada, where you have stricter requirements but also better reputation, right? So for this encyclopedia, we categorize companies in a different in the latter way, right? So differentiating between these onshore companies, like, global jurisdictions, and the classic offshore, and also then partnerships, which are a category of their own. And I think it's important to make that distinction, right? Because people sometimes may think of offshore and, oh yeah, it's the same thing if I incorporate in Singapore, if I incorporate in, I don't know, in BVI, they're both tax-free. But there's a number of factors that make them completely different in reality. So a couple things that I think people should take into consideration. Number one, banking. That's something that is not taken into consideration often enough, but just access to payment gateways and platforms and fintechs and so on. Like, for example, having access to Stripe, right? In Brazil, we have access to Stripe, in all of Europe, in the US, in Singapore too, in the Emirates. But all of these classic offshore jurisdictions, like, you have no Stripe in the Caribbean, you have no Stripe in Uruguay, in Panama, etc. And that is by itself a big thing, right? Just having access to this single payment gateway, because most of these online platforms for e-commerce or these kind of things, they have connections to Stripe, right? You can connect directly to your Stripe account and to PayPal, let's say. And then if you don't have an account that's able to do that, a company that's able to do that, then you have to start looking for more and more obscure payment platforms, like places where to sell your ebooks or courses or services or whatever you're selling online. Or alternatively, you're going to have to open a payment subsidiary, right? Like, you have your main company in, let's say, BVI, but you have to open a partnership in the UK or in the US to have it as a subsidiary to receive these payments, because you need access to something like Stripe or PayPal. So don't neglect banking. That is a big factor. I was talking more about payment gateways actually here, but just regular banking too, right? If you go to many of these jurisdictions, for example, I once had to open a company for the Isle of Man. It was a kind of in a sensitive industry, which what made it harder to get banking options. So in the end, we had to go with a banking option in St. Kitts and Nevis. And you look at the bank and it looks like it was designed in 1995. And if any incoming transaction costs like $50 or $100, something like that. So it really is like these banks, which the UX is terrible. And it's basically only for putting a large amount of money there and leaving it there and not touching it, right? Whereas if you have access to these fintechs like Mercury, like Novel, like RelayFi, like Wise, like Revolut, etc., it's just so much more seamless, and you have as many credit cards as you want to create and as many accounts as you want to create, and it costs a fraction of what you would have with these banks. So Caribbean companies, I'm not shitting on them. They have their purposes. They're really great for, I don't know, a holding, for if you want to invest internationally, or if you want to sometimes if you're in a more hard to get industry, like some stuff related to crypto or with gambling or these kinds of things, it has its fair uses. But for the regular providing services or e-commerce, especially if you're dealing with first world markets that are used to good payment gateways, then might not be the best option.
Totally. And also bank to bank, like I had a client that the problem she was having is that she had a bank in St. Kitts and Nevis. One, what you mentioned about Stripe, and two, like even other banks from other places not wanting to do business with her. Like bank transfers not allowed to St. Kitts and Nevis directly. So she could not receive money from Stripe. Yeah. She could not receive money from certain countries that the bank of the client was in. So yes, definitely something to think about. And I think what you say, right? For different wealth tiers, the more money you have, maybe you put what's the security? I'm curious. Like that bank of the 1995, that bank, when you put the money in there, like on a scale from 1 to 10, how secure do you feel your money is? Versus, Wise and all that stuff that they can froze your bank account with hundreds of thousands in one click.
Yeah, that is less of a risk, right? Because I guess by these very old banks, they have less of these automatic analysis of risk and like and such transactions. I don't think they would just automatically block you for any reason. Most of these banks, they have
basically because they can't. They don't have the technology.
Yeah, they don't have the data. They don't have.
They need a person that wakes up and does it manually. Oh, there's a transaction in here. It's not
exactly. No, but
go ahead.
You do find more personal touch, I guess, in some of these more traditional banks sometimes, especially if they're family run. They're not like a huge big corporation like Santander or HSBC or like not naming any particular, but like if it's a private owned family bank or something like that, you generally have a bit more personal touch and things are more negotiable than if you're dealing with a multinational corporation. And what you mentioned there with not being able to receive transactions from certain banks, that is another point as well, which is related to the reputation of the country, right? So there is this point or about the mechanics of it not being able to receive a payment, but there's also the reputational side of, will my clients want to do business with me? Will it be easy for them to do business with me? Because if you're in a country like, if you have clients in a country like Portugal, Spain, or Italy, or Germany, etc., these countries have their tax haven blacklists, right? And I'm not talking about the EU tax haven blacklist. There is one for the whole bloc, but countries can create their own, national tax haven blacklists. And there is usually a good amount of penalties for doing business with countries in these areas. The most important of them usually being you can't deduct expenses for the corporate tax if it's coming from a tax haven, or it's much harder to do so, right? There's a lot more difficulty involved in the process, so they won't be able to put that as an expense to lower their tax amount. And also usually that triggers inspections and audits much faster, right? If you're dealing with companies in these tax haven blacklists, you're going to be your company in the EU, especially in Germany, for example, that immediately puts a red flag, like, oh, they're doing business with, I don't know, with BVI, with Panama, or something like that. Let's see what's going on, right? Whereas if you're only dealing with, in the case of the EU, other EU companies or a jurisdiction that is more reputable, like the United States, then that's much less of a risk. So especially when you're dealing in B2B, right? For B2C, that doesn't really matter that much. Like if you're selling an ebook to an individual client, who cares? But like if you're doing a large consultation or something like that, then there might be an inspection afterwards, and they might ask to show proof that you provided the service, to show proof of this or that, so that there's a real establishment in the country of incorporation, and it can get quite annoying quite fast. So that is another point. Banking reputation is also a big factor when choosing your countries.
Yes, totally. Now that we are talking about banking, which was the other one, we talked about citizenship, residencies, offshore companies. Banking is very tied to this. What are you looking for in a bank? Or maybe a better question, like, what's the structure of banks? What different type of banks do you want to have in a sovereign setup? Like, for example, you mentioned the fintech. Mm-hmm. What other banks would you be like, these, and these, to have a whole plan?
Yeah. Before we delve into that, may I just quickly put one last point on the offshore companies part?
Sure.
Double tax treaties. That's something you also have to look out for. Because, for example, if you have a C Corp in the United States and you live in Brazil, there's no double tax treaty between them. So whenever you distribute a dividend to Brazil, there's a 30% withholding at source in the United States. Whereas if you live in basically anywhere in the EU, you do have a double taxation treaty with the United States, and that withholding is reduced to 15 or even 10%. So we're talking, there's a part of corporate tax of the company, but there's also what is withheld at the source for your dividends, interest, royalties, etc. And that is something that can be very well optimized with double tax treaties. And if you're not looking at that, then that is a factor that again puts it on the tailor-made structure thing, because these tax treaties are always bilateral between individual countries. So it depends on where you live, what countries have double tax treaties with, and which ones are going to work. Right. So that is another point to look out for. Does the country where I want to incorporate have a double tax treaty with my country of residence? And if not, is there a kind of a middle country that we can use to have a holding in the middle? Right. So, for example, in the case of the EU, there's 3 countries in the EU that do not have withholding at source for dividends: Estonia, Cyprus, and Malta. So, for example, if you have you live in Brazil and you have an Estonian company or a Cyprus company, you may be able to reduce those withholdings from the US and then bring them to Brazil if you have the right substance and incorporation to be able to use these tax rates. But that was a final point on the incorporation side.
Yes, very, very powerful. And yes, the importance of having an extra step in the middle. I truly believe that holding companies, having LLCs for holdings or one of these companies in these countries and have a bridge, it's super smart, because you're going to offset for everybody thinking about, but it's too complex. You're going to offset the cost of it just by the amount of taxes you're going to not have to pay. So
yeah, it depends on your size, right? If you're still small, maybe hold off on that. I've already seen people earning I've already had clients who were earning I don't know, $2,000-$3,000 a month, and they were already asking me, what about holdings and trusts? And I was like, not yet, my friend, not yet.
Yes.
Not
correct.
Yet. Focus on making more money first.
The audience listening to this podcast is already like business people, and they have multiple companies, and we're talking about more wealth. But yes, for sure, like if you're starting out, the best thing you can do, even like people asking, should I invest in crypto? It's like, making 3K a month, should I put 1K in crypto and live with the other 2K? It's like, no, crypto is not going to give you, like, one, you don't have control over crypto, even if you love that whatever coin or token. And number 2, like, the return you can give on something that you work on actively, which is your business, if you are an entrepreneur, is always going to give you more. Something I learned from Alex Hormozi is get to the point, like, you invest in yourself, keep investing until you make 200,000 a year. After that, like, consider part of your money allocating it somewhere else. But until then, just like focus on learning more, which is something that as well we mentioned before hitting record, which is like focused on building the companies right now.
Yeah, my investment is my own company, basically.
Exactly.
It's the main thing I'm investing on.
Exactly. So
regarding banking, you
banking,
asked.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a couple.
What's the setup?
There's a couple of things which I think really again differentiate between different options. What really sets countries apart, right? And I think one of them is being CRS or not, if they're part of the multilateral information exchange agreement. And again, like CRS is not something that is all encompassing and that they automatically know everything all the time. They have all the info. It's not like that. We actually have an article on 35 loopholes of the CRS. It certainly has a lot of loopholes, but still, ideally, you want to have a bank account in a country that does not exchange info with where you're living. Again, you might want to check out on this, because maybe your country has some penalties or some things related to countries like that, or they might ask you like legally, for example, in Brazil or Colombia. In Colombia, you have to declare all your bank accounts abroad legally for the income tax if you're a tax resident here. So that's something you might want to be able to look out on. Whereas other countries, it doesn't really matter where you have your bank accounts. They don't ask for that. They only ask for your income, or they don't even ask for anything. Still, CRS, there's a couple of jurisdictions which are non-CRS, which I think are interesting. Thailand is one of them, where you're able to open a bank account even without being a resident there. As a tourist, it's still possible. Paraguay is one of them, not CRS.
Yes.
And it's currently one of the up and coming jurisdictions. São Tome, which we talked about later, is a non-CRS one, which is very low profile, right? You don't find them in many you don't find them in any blacklist because no one knows about them.
Not in Spain, not in Portugal. I think not in Italy
so
either.
like it's not CRS, but it's not in any blacklist. So that's also pretty cool. Georgia was also not, but they signed it and supposed to go in force this year. So no longer not CRS. But yeah, that is a couple options and a factor. Crypto friendliness, I think, is a factor that is becoming increasingly important. More and more people are looking for accounts that are crypto friendly. You have already a couple of examples of jurisdictions that are quite crypto friendly, like Georgia, like Panama. You have some stuff there. Switzerland, where if you send a transaction from or to a crypto exchange, it's fine. They're not gonna block your account like Wise does. They're not gonna be asking you a lot of questions and bothering you. And in some cases, like in Panama, you're able to deposit directly in crypto, and the bank converts it into dollars or euros or whatever. Compare that to a jurisdiction. I always like to cite this example from a client we had. Uruguay. Uruguay is a tax haven. Uruguay is a place where, if you structure correctly, you can pay zero tax. Uruguay is also a boomerocracy, right? It's a country of older people. It's a country of older, more centrist institutions. And I've already had this client who had his income coming from Bitcoin, right? His main income source was being paid in Bitcoin. And he told me, when he went to have an interview with one of the local banks, when he mentioned that his income came in crypto, he said, they looked at me as if I was a drug dealer. They were like, oh, what? And they didn't open the account, right? So that is something to keep in mind, right? Not all tax havens are made equal. Some tax havens are crypto friendly. Some are, no, we do not want to have to do with any of this. So that is a very important factor, because in his case, he really wanted to move to Uruguay, and in the end we were able to make it work. But we had to create a whole US LLC to receive the payments, and then from there receive the profit distributions, which then I receive profit distributions in dollars from my holding company, which is more reputable than receiving directly in Bitcoin. So that's something but you had to create a whole workaround, because he was in a country that was not crypto friendly when his main thing was being encrypted. So important distinguishing point, I guess.
Yes, correct.
Then also I would say card access. It's something that is also very looked into. US LLC, a lot of people are into US LLCs because you can get the ITIN and then get a credit history in the US. And there's exactly, and there's just the requirements to get these top cards varies a lot between countries. I remember reading in the newsletter from Staatenlos on how to get the Amex Platinum. And then if you look at Georgia, like you need, I think, a fifth of the monthly income requirement. And the total cost, like the fees for the card, are also less than half. So like in Germany, having an Amex Platinum, it's something that, oh, wow, you have an Amex Platinum. What an elite card. And it is an elite card. It gives you access to lounges and airports. It gives you a lot of points and miles and all these cool things. And then you look at Georgia and you need way less to be able to get it. So that is something you can try to optimize for as well, right? Get these prestige cards that either will give you points or travel insurance or discounts in different places. That's something that I think banks can also offer, which is again a main differentiator between fintechs and traditional banks, right? Because these fintechs, they're really cheap, they're really easy to use, they have good apps, but they generally offer you no interest, no investment options, and no cashback or very little card options. So that's somewhere I would say it's interesting to diversify. Having some of these fintechs for transfers, for regular payments, for remittances and so on. But then for your daily expenses, having a card that gives you more benefits when you spend with it, especially if you're someone who's an online business who's driving, for example, all the paid traffic for Settee, I run it on my cashback card, because then the ads from Google and from Facebook and so on, they're giving me cashback. So that's something you can
Totally.
optimize for as an online businessman as well.
Yeah, also for the rent, you have apps or projects like Plastic.
Airbnb or
Yeah. So Plastic with Q at the end, that gives you the ability to put, for example, rent. If it's Airbnb, it's easier because you pay there. But if it's a rent that you would pay with a wire, with a bank transfer, you can instead send it to Plastic, pay with a card. It's a combination. You can pay with a card, and they are going to send the transfer to the end person, and you can collect the points on that transaction. So people, for example, living in Miami that would pay 3K, 4K in rent, instead of sending wire transfers, they just pay 3-4K with a card, and they get points on that. So really interesting.
Oh man,
stuff.
I'm just looking at this platform. I didn't know about it.
Yes,
It's
Plastic
really cool.
with Q. Yeah. So plenty of options, and because it's something so, how can I say it? It's like a game, there are a lot of companies that are building around this. Like, for example, when you get the ITAN, because we have the EIN, right, for the companies, and the
For the
ITAN for
company
a
and
personal. Yeah. But there are credit builders, which is also something very interesting that help you build your credit score faster. So definitely a world on itself. But also, like, talking about banking and the platinums and all that, the other one, it's Smiles. That's another encyclopedia that you have translated in Portuguese, one that I've consumed like very thoroughly as well. So yeah, let's talk about more, like, combine it with the Miles.
Okay,
What's something
so
we should get to know about this? Yeah.
Okay, so the main point, I guess, is that you have three alliances, right? They're very large: Star Alliance, Sky Team, and One World. And ideally, you're always flying within the same alliance, because you can credit the flights. If it's from the same alliance, you can credit in any of the miles programs. So, let's say you fly frequently with Lufthansa, or you're flying frequently with, I don't know, Copa Airlines, whatever. You can credit those flights in any of the programs of the airline, but only once. So it's really important to, as early as possible, pick the flight program that's going to make the most sense to you, based on where you travel, how your travel schedule is looking like. In terms of status and so on, for Star Alliance, there are two airlines that qualify you the fastest to status-wide, to alliance-wide status, right? Because you have the Star Alliance Silver, Star Alliance Gold status, which gives you additional benefits in all the airlines, like, extra luggage or priority check-in and all of these kinds of things. And if you qualify at the airline level, you generally, at some point, get the alliance level as well, right? And the fastest ones in Star Alliance by far are Avianca and Aegean. Avianca, however, requires you to fly at least 80% of the qualifying flights with Avianca. That means if you're traveling within or to or through Colombia regularly, then Avianca is very easy to get the flights. It's the fastest one. Like you can do it in just a couple of flights. You can get a Star Alliance Silver and then quickly also Star Alliance Gold. And then Aegean is the other one where it's also super fast, but the requirement there is that you have to fly at least twice with Aegean for the Silver status, and then 4 times with Aegean for the Gold status, if I remember correctly. Or it was something like this. But
Okay.
the main point is, a yearly trip within Greece is enough to qualify for the route things, and then you can fly the rest that you want, the other flights with any other Star Alliance airline, and then you can qualify for Silver and Gold super quick. So we'll take a look at these two programs: Avianca if you're flying in LATAM and going through etc. Colombia, or Aegean if you're okay with doing a flight in Greece like once a year or so. And then there's the other programs that are the runner-ups, and then I would recommend taking a look there in more detail. The guide is available in English as well. For Sky Team, my conclusion from the entire encyclopedia is that it's just easier to use Flying Blue, the program from Air France and KLM. It's just the best at that level, unless you have very specific needs, like, oh, I live in just this one country with this airline and I'm only using this one. Then it might make more sense to just use that particular program, because you have this status, the alliance-wide status, but in the airline status, you may have additional bonuses when flying just with that airline. So if you're flying a lot with just one airline, then it might make more sense to get that one. But overall, if you're flying globally, if you're flying internationally, Flying Blue is really great on SkyTeam. Then there's one airline that is not in any of the three programs, but that is worth mentioning too, which is Emirates. Emirates is not in any of the programs, but they're also super strong. They have a great amount of partnerships just on their own, right? So you can still credit flights from a lot of airlines in the Emirates program. And they also have this partnership with Marriott. So if you're staying in hotels, especially, you can also credit that for miles. So if you're looking, there's one program that is not in any of the alliances that is worth looking into, I would say it's Emirates.
Yes. Yeah, all these cool pictures that you see on social media about these flights that they say are one of the best in the world, Qatar Airlines, Emirates, like these big spaceful airplanes that they have. It's great. Yes, actually, like United States, I think it's the king, right? The top one country in the world when it comes to points, miles, and offer and diversity of cards and quality of the rewards you get. Then you've got what you mentioned, Georgia with the Amex Platinum. You have Panama as well with Visa Blacks and so on. And then the other one that I was going to mention is this one, the UAE, right? Dubai. And the banking in there, there's a bank called FAB, with FAV. And yeah, I've heard really great things about that, and it's something I'm gonna explore really soon. So it's like,
that's something also with the
ahead.
miles, right? There's the combination of the miles and the banking thing, which are these co-branded cards, right? These cards from a specific airline where for every dollar spent you get a certain number of qualifying miles. And that depends on, of course, being a resident or having a bank account in a said country, right? They're usually only offered for a certain country, so not all of them. But if you are a resident of one of these countries and you're using those airlines, it can make a good amount of sense. Because, for example, in Avianca, here for Avianca, if you have a local card, which you can get as a non-resident as well in Colombia, you can open a bank account and eventually, with enough credit history, get an airline credit card. With any accumulating transaction, you extend the validity of your points for a year, right? So, I haven't flown with Avianca for over a year, you would lose those miles. But if you have the credit card from Life Miles and you're using it, then you're always extending the validity of your miles. So that is something that can be quite useful, just so your points never expire and you keep accumulating them. But that, again, depends on having these co-branded cards, which, like, it's not available anywhere. But in the case of Avianca, in the case of Life Miles, it's available in pretty much all of Latin America. So you have it in Panama, you have it in Colombia, you have it in Ecuador, Nicaragua, El Salvador, etc. Right? You have it in a lot of countries.
Yes. And what we were mentioning about citizenships and the residencies as well, don't bring it too far that you optimize your life for points. And you end up going to places like Greece when you don't have any reason to go to Greece, just because you keep your card of Aegean and you keep points from this, from that, and you don't lose the point from last year from Avianca. So yeah, but definitely, like, if you're knowledgeable, I'm curious to know what's the point where, for you personally, Francisco, that it makes sense or it does not make sense. Because I've also heard some opinions on the points and the miles and all that stuff that is like, oh yeah, people that fly on miles, on points, and spend hundreds of hours looking for the best ratio of mile to point to euro to dollar to this to that, when they could use that money to just make more money. You can just use that time for quality time with your people, with what you love to do, or just doing more money, and you're gonna end up making more than what you save with points and miles. Like, what's the sweet spot for you? Like, when does it make sense, and when it's like, I'm losing my time?
I think I think you can get autistic with that. I think just
Totally.
this over engineering is it becomes a hobby in the end. I think something that makes sense is just finding a good airline program that you're going to use and then sticking with it. Not over engineering too much of it, and then yeah, the other thing is maybe just delegate that. You don't have to be the one who's doing all of that. So currently for all my flights, I'm running it through Caio, who's a friend of mine who runs an agency for flights, and he's able to do these miles flights, which to just give an idea, it's not using my miles points. They how do you say? They create the ticket, they emit the ticket with miles. So these are points that I can register. These are flights that I can register on these airline programs. They don't give me miles because they were already emitted using miles, but they give me segments, right? And a lot of these airlines, they qualify also by how many segments, how many routes you've flown. And basically I just run it by him like, hey, Caio, I want to go to Panama among like these and these dates. Can you tell me if there's any good options or if I should just book it myself? And then he'll shoot me like, yeah, in this case, like there's not really any discount you can get with miles, or sometimes it can get you really, really good discounts. So for example, now in March, I'm going to Panama, and he was able to find me an executive class flight from where I'm staying here in Colombia to Panama, which usually, if we're going to book it through the platforms, would cost me like 5,600 reais, so over $1,000. And he got it to me for like 883 reais, which is less than $200.
Yes. Exactly.
So in this case, like if I wanted to book through the platform, that would be the price I would pay on the economic class, with maybe even without my luggage. And now I got an executive one all the way there. So that's just what I've been doing, right? I've been just, okay, I picked this program where I'm going to put all my segments to qualify for the status at some point, and I'm just running it by Caio. Caio, I want to go here at around this time, find me the best flight, he'll find it for me, and that's it. I'm happy to pay him like I don't know, his commission, because in the end, it's cheaper for me, both in money and in time, to just delegate that task. So I haven't been searching my flights now for the last 3-4 months. I just send it to him.
Brilliant. Like somebody who is a master at this, and you can delegate it. Because when you said delegated, I thought about a virtual assistant. But wait, no, somebody who's a pro at this, an agency. That's brilliant. Never thought of that.
And again,
there are services.
In the end, it's cheaper.
Yes.
In the end, I'm paying less and getting better. Yeah. So
everybody wins. He wins, you win. Excellent. Really like it.
Yeah,
we're gonna talk about. I was gonna say that we're gonna talk about him later, after. Yes, these are, ladies and gentlemen, these are the things. If you can perceive it, just as a bracket here. The value of having a consultation. Like, imagine you have a consultation with Francisco, and you're interested in miles, and he explains this to you and tailors it to you, and says, hey, you are traveling here and there and there. Oh, I recommend you this. So you can skip over, reading the encyclopedia. He translated it. He's like, he has all the knowledge in here, what I told you at the beginning of the podcast, everybody listening. And it's like tailored to you, and then having the content that can help you book the flight. And what's the price of that? This is priceless. And you're being super generous on this podcast, Francisco, by the way. Like, you're not holding anything back. It's like value. Yeah. It's incredible. Really, really generous. And yes, well, miles. The next one, of course, is author programs, that because it's not released yet, we're not gonna go so deep on that. Let's start with a personal question. Airbnb or hotels, and why?
Okay, so
For you.
What I've been doing is, if it's over a month, generally it's just better to get an Airbnb, because the long-term rates are better. But for short-term, booking has been winning. This depends a lot on the market and on the city, because some places, if you look at booking for a monthly, it's ridiculously expensive. But for example, in Budapest, when I was there with my friend Danilo, we split an apartment which was 3 bedrooms, kitchen, two bathrooms, etc., for 800 euros the month. So it was like 400 euros each. That was fine on Booking. And one thing that I like about Booking is that they have this loyalty program running now, which is a genius. So after 5 stays and then after 15 stays, you get these status levels, which gives you like free breakfast or 5 to 20% discounts and these kinds of things, that's an incentive. Airbnb is not giving me this incentive, and if I find a similar price but on Booking, then I'll choose Booking just so I can get more status. Because okay, cool, I've got a free breakfast. That is an amenity. I don't have to go out and find a place to eat. I just eat at the hotel. So if it's short term, I'll go for Booking. If it's long term, I'll go for Airbnb.
Nice. And you are listening this from Francisco, who's been again to 30 countries in 4 continents. So he stayed in a few places, just a few places during these last 4 years. So lastly, because we covered miles and stays, it's because, well, we want to visit places. That's the nomadic lifestyle, right? What's for you nomadism? How do you understand nomadism? And because there are different stages in nomadism as well, we all went through that. I think the phase where you start and you're just like crazy, just going here, there, here, there, here, there. Every 3 days you're changing places, and then usually people tend to slow travel, as they get older. How do you understand nomadism, and where are you? So after the mate break, we stop after drinking so much water, tea, water. Francisco with the mate. You're a mate passionate. Now we're getting into nomadism, but
we're getting into the
a small break. You love mate, man.
Man, I do.
In Colombia with coffee, and you still drink mate. Beautiful.
Yes, no, yerba mate is a part of southern Brazilian culture. It's very strong. In all places in South Brazil, right? In the south, in Rio Grande do Sul, they drink it the hot way, chimarrão, we call it. And then in Paraná, where I lived the last years, I was in Brazil. They drink it very cold because it's a warmer place. They drink it like the Paraguayans, like tereré. And I love it. It's healthy. It doesn't hurt your stomach like coffee does if you have a lot of it. And I like because it's also more like if you drink coffee, it's usually like these shots of caffeine, like caffeine and then dump, caffeine then dump. And if you're drinking mate all day, right, it's more of a slow curve. Because when you drink it, it's still stronger, but then as you keep drinking it, there's less and less, of the caffeine left in the leaves. So by the end of the day, like I can drink this at 7 p.m. because I've been drinking it the whole day. There's no more caffeine in it, and it's just like flavored water, but nice.
Yes,
so,
totally.
Cheers to mate.
Cheers to mate, man. Amen. Love mate, and it gives you this sharpness, this boost in your mind. It's very good. So okay, now that we are caffeinated, that we are with our brain power at its max after drinking so much mate, let's talk about nomadism. How do you understand it? Where you are right now in this nomadic journey?
Yeah. So there's different kinds of people who do it. For example, Christoph, he's the typical jet setter. He's every different week in a different place, and he literally can't stop. Like he like, no, this is the way I like it. Just every week traveling. The way I like to do it, I've increasingly been noticing this, and we talked about it when we were in Floripa as well. Is basing up in a place for at the very least a month to 3 months, and then having that place as a base of operations from which to explore the surrounding areas. Because I see it in myself, because I still do these trips where I'm like 1 week here, 2 weeks there, sometimes for conferences, sometimes for work, sometimes for tourism, and my productivity just drops so much, right? When you have a base, it allows you to create a routine. And as much as some people may dread routine, as much as a lot of people might want to escape the routines because they have a shitty routine, routine is so essential for productivity. Just having a time where you're hitting the gym, where you're doing your work, where you're going out for a walk, having this constancy in your life makes it so much easier to be productive. And And so far, I like to find a place where I am comfortable, where, finding a city where I feel safe to go walk, where it's good weather outside, good a lot of the time, where I have gym nearby, where I have everything nearby, where I can just do everything walking, where I don't need to take much transportation. And from there, ideally, you also have good connections to interesting places, right? To nature, to touristic sites, to things like that. And that's usually what I've been focusing on. So in Morocco, when I based up there for some time, I was in Tangier, which I would say fit this bill quite well. In Portugal, also Lisbon area. Here in Colombia, I'm in a city that fits that bill too. And in Brazil, when I'm around, I last year I based up in Rio, and that was also a great decision. When it comes to having a place where you can find everything you need for your daily life and create a solid routine, while at the same time having adventure nearby for the eventual getaways and weekends and so on.
And now that you are very clear with what you want, what you value right now, where do you see yourself in the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years? Because when we met in Floripa, by the way, you're taller than I expected. You are also very like athlete, like very, very strong, training hard. It's like we were talking about this, like how we value having some more roots, the opportunity to meet people deeper, to have more stronger bonds, relationships, whether it's relationships with women or it is with business partners, friends. How do you see yourself shaping in the next years?
Yeah, that is another point in favor of slow traveling, right? When you're going everywhere from place to place, it's not possible to establish these deeper relationships, right? You're not going to make a life. It's very unlikely that you're making a lifelong friend if you're just going out for a week together, or that you're going to meet a life partner in a week too, right? Things need time to build. And so what I'm looking is to find a place or two places or three places where I feel comfortable living part of the year and creating roots again, right? One of these places is Brazil, right? I will go back to Brazil every year or every 2 years or so and spend a couple of months there. I don't want to be a tax resident of Brazil for obvious reasons. My clientele is in Brazil. It's a politically delicate subject because my business partner is a politically exposed person, so we want to avoid being in the eyes of the Brazilian.
Yes.
So I myself and our business is going to stay outside of Brazil, but I will definitely be visiting my family every year, and I'll definitely be visiting my friends as well. So I want to be in a country where I have proximity to Brazil, where it's not going to be like 20 hours to fly to Brazil, where it's not going to be 2 or 3 flight connections to get to see my family and friends. So that's why I'm also partially why I'm favoring Latin America, because shorter, faster, cheaper flights too. And yeah, so that's basically it. I want to find 2, maybe 3 bases where I'm going to spend time cycling between them. The one of them is going to be Brazil. I already know that. In Brazil, I'm still not completely decided if it's going to be Floripa or Rio. I still have to think more and spend time in both of them a bit more. And then here in the Americas, I'm already scouting. So Colombia is a potential one. I'm really liking where I'm at right now. So that is a cool one. But I also want to explore Panama. I also want to explore Asuncion, because a lot of people have been talking about it, and I've heard recommendations of Asuncion over Panama City, which would surprise me as a Brazilian, knowing what we know as a stereotype of Paraguay, right? The cheap place where you go to buy electronics.
But it's
and Argentina also. Exactly.
2 different worlds, Ciudad del Este de Asunción. But yeah, Argentina as well, especially now with the situation, because it's this balance between. I'm curious to hear more about Argentina and Venezuela when you go there, your experience, because also like Turkey, when the lira it's devaluating so fast, and it's like, is it something that I want to get the most of it, or I'm also going to be affected a lot by how the situation right now, Yes, I know that you go there with $1,000 and it's much more, it lasts longer, or you can do more things than 5 years ago.
Yeah.
For sure, but how is the quality of the country compared to 5 years ago as well? Argentina,
True.
Venezuela, Turkey. So I'm
I
curious
think there are
about
some
that.
points though that I think there are some points to keep in mind though, because as a Brazilian, they don't stamp my passport when I go into Argentina. I can just go in with an ID card, right? So, um, you know, I'm not going to stay there illegally, but just saying that if you wanted to get into Brazil or into Argentina as a citizen of one of the Mercosur countries, they don't stamp your passport. You can just go in with an ID. So
But they track,
theoretically,
but they track the day you enter somehow.
if you go in by land, no.
Yeah.
If you go in by airplane, then of course you have the record of the
Yes.
flight ticket and so on. But if you go in by
By
land,
land.
like if you look at the border between Uruguay and Brazil in a lot of these cities, it's a street, right? You're in Chuy, Uruguay here, and you're in Chuy, Brazil here. You walk.
Yeah.
You have friends in Rio Grande do Sul who, for the weekend, like, what are we gonna do this weekend? Let's go to Uruguay and drink some beer over there.
And they just walk.
Yeah, just get the
Yeah.
car and go, right? So it's much less trackable than you would have in other areas. And there's also, a potential bright future for some of these countries here. At the moment, we're seeing kind of a red wave in Latin America, right? A lot of leftist governments. But for next year, there's going to be the elections in Argentina. And no, sorry, actually, it's this year, end of this year. There's the elections in Argentina, and Milei is looking to be quite strong. Maybe we get to see a shift in this country that's been going down for so long. And here in Colombia, even it is, I would say, a bad government. Not a government I think is good for the growth of the country and any of that. But it seems that there's more pushback here than you have in Brazil, right? Like they wanted to regulate and screw the Uber and the app drivers here, and now they shifted back because there was too much pushback. So that's something nice to see. Whereas in Brazil at the moment, it seems a bit, at least for the foreseeable future, a bit darker, because both the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary are in the hands of the left. Whereas in Colombia, it still seems that there's more pushback on some of the shit they're putting over here. So, yeah, in that sense, I think, maybe this country is in a bad situation and is in a bad direction, but it might not, fall down so much.
Yeah. We'll see. Time will tell if it recovers and at which point it recovers. But what we know for sure is that there are places you've been in the world that are hidden gems, that are like top places. And I think it's the best way to wrap up this nomadism segment in here. And if they want to know more, has an encyclopedia. Francisco has the encyclopedia on nomadism, so you can explore more in there. But what are some places that you can share here in the podcast that caught your attention, whether it's on paper and you want to go, like for example you mentioned before Mauritius, you want to go to these places, but what are some others that it's like, I love these places in the world? I already know some answers like Sao Tome, Rio, Floripa. What are other places, and then you can go into the one that you want more in depth.
I still really want to visit Cyprus and Malta. Malta seems a bit too small for me, but that's still seems interesting. The island of Madeira in Portugal is also a destination that's been very high on my list because you have better taxes than the continental Portugal. The company regime they have in Madeira is actually one of the best in the entire EU. You can get 5% corporate tax down there, which is sweet for EU standards. Yeah, in the Americas, I would say Panama. Dominican Republic is partially a hidden gem because they have this territorial system where foreign income is tax-free for, if I remember correctly, just 1 or 2 years officially. But if you go in through the pensionado visa or the rentista visa or the inversión visa, then the territorial tax is permanent. So in theory, the territorial tax is just for a small period, but in reality, if you're going through the most commonly used visas, then there's no time limit on it. And from all I've heard regarding Caribbean countries, Dominican Republic is by far the best one to live, just in terms of things to do and options you have. So that's also one that's on my list and I want to get to see as well. In terms of Brazil, there's a number of places in Brazil that I haven't yet been to that I want to visit. Right, I've been to some of the, I would say, top spots in the country, so I know a pretty good deal of Santa Catarina, my home state. I know Paraná quite well. I know Rio also very well. But in Minas Gerais, there's so many cities I haven't been to yet that I would like to see. And also Espírito Santo. People have been telling me that Vitória is quite nice in quality of life right now, and you have a lot of beaches, and you have, also this coastal lifestyle. What else? Yeah, I think those are some of the main ones. I'm not really that interested into Southeast Asia or that region of the world. But again, I would like to see Mauritius, and I would like to see Cape Verde as well. They have some really good tax incentives, and they're Portuguese speaking, and they seem to be this middle ground between Brazil and São Tome, right? In terms of development and so on. Like they're already more developed, more stable, bigger population than São Tome, while still being Portuguese speaking and having this closer connection to Europe and so on. But that's also one I wanted to see at some point as well.
So you are pretty busy. You have the list of the places you want to visit, but so far you have already visited plenty of places. What are, let's say, your top picks when you go back to your memories, or when you see pictures, videos on your albums? Be like, man, the time when I was there, those were good times.
Okay, Hungary, 100%, 100%. That was really cool. Switzerland was also really nice, but if you're going there, it's probably not going to be a long-term stay if you don't have a lot of money to spend. Very expensive place. I really loved Spain too. Valencia is a really nice city. I would say Morocco is worth it for a month, because it's not a place I would base up for long term. It's not a country I see myself living in, but there's just so many unique experiences for you there, like riding camels, eating camels, drinking camel milk. Just kidding. It's not just camel, but also like going to the Sahara. I witnessed rain in the Sahara. That was something really awesome. Like I stayed in an oasis for a week. I went to the mountains there. I like a lot of things that you would not usually experience in your typical tourism destinations. It can do a lot of unique stuff there, which when I think about like memories I'm gonna have for the rest of my life, São Tome and Morocco have a lot of things that I'm gonna keep saying like forever, right? Yeah. And in Brazil, go to Floripa. If you're listening to this, you haven't been to Floripa, go to Floripa, go to Rio.
You have two promoters of Floripa here.
Yeah, go to Floripa and go to Rio.
Yeah, Rio, tell us a bit more about there, because I saw the pictures on your Twitter, the ones of the hikes you did, and it looks stunning. Like, what's your favorite things to do personally? Like, I don't know, there's plenty of things to do in Rio, but what you, Francisco, loves to do there when you're visiting?
Okay, so Rio, I would say, is one of the best beach city I've ever been to. The close to Floripa, I would say, but yeah, Rio has this combination of everything, right? They have in Zona Sul and partially just in the tip of Barra, you have this area which is super dense, where it's walkable, right? You walk and you have gyms, you have places to go out, you have restaurants, you have everything you can need in walking distance. You have beaches right there as well, right? Like 5 minutes from where you're living, you have beach, or maybe a bit more far if you're. Anyway, beach is super close too, and there are good beaches as well. You can surf, you can go into the water. You have amazing sunsets, which is something that is quite underrated, just having a place where you have beautiful sunsets. And hiking. You have so many hiking options, right? You have, because in every direction, it's these, hills and morros that you have. So there's, every time I go to Rio, I do 1 or 2 new hikes. And the list is still very long, right? I still have a lot of hikes to do in that area, and you have waterfalls, and you have beautiful views of the whole city. Every place that if you hike up, if you hike 1 hour up and you're at a viewpoint, no matter where you go, you're still gonna have a beautiful view. It's I don't know what's up with Rio sunsets and views. So in that sense, Rio is amazing, and that's why I think like São Paulo can't compare. because Sao Paulo, is a bit bigger when it comes to like job opportunities and employment and so on. But if you're not depending on that, if you're not depending on the business environment that much, Rio is fantastic. And again, like in terms of flight connections, second best in Brazil. It has flights to Panama, it has flights to Colombia, it has flights to all these places, to Europe. And in terms of concerts and events and shows and everything, there's really two cities in Brazil that have all of the international ones. Like whenever there's a Brazil tour from an international artist, they go São Paulo, Rio, out. Sometimes maybe Curitiba, they also include it, one or another city there, another capital, but it's usually São Paulo, Rio. So if you're in that axis, you're going to get the most international experience you can in Brazil. Right, Floripa still gets some of it too, but it's not nearly as much as Rio.
Yeah, Balneario Camboriú as well, but definitely Rio much more, for sure.
Yeah, but if you want something a bit more chill, laid back, and while still having all this nature, Floripa is the place to go.
It's the place for sure. An island with plenty of beach, so you can always have fun. Even some nice hikes, by the way, La Goña del Este. Bonito. It's beautiful, that one.
And the dunes.
Stunning
Don't
views.
forget the dunes. It's
the dunes. You have multiple dunes.
It's so crazy. You're in a place where you look and it's these, like, in one direction you see a lagoon, the other direction you see the sea, you see tropical rainforest, you see like swampish areas, and you're in huge dunes, and you can sandboard and you can just walk all the way. It's totally. The variety in Floripa is mwah.
Yeah. And then you have pine trees and hikes, and also you have city, which is really useful to have like everything you need. You have shopping malls, so you also have that part. Let's say comfortable lifestyle covered, or like 20-minute drive, you go to São José, to the other side of the continent, and you have anything you might need there. So yeah, definitely a great spot in here. And talking about great spots, another thing that was great is you coming to the show. What a show. My goodness, like people will be like, this was one of the best 2 hours that I spent lately. If they're interested in these topics around sovereignty, nomadism, banking, offshore, everything we talked about, residency, citizenships, everything. Like I promised, and as always, he delivered like a well of knowledge, really, really generous. Francisco, thanks for being here. I'd love for people to know how they can find you.
So
your social media
interested,
consultations.
If you're interested in everything related to internationalization and so on in Portuguese, go to settee.io. But if you're not speaking Portuguese, which I think if you're listening to the show in English, you most likely don't, check out statenlos.ch. They have the website both in English and German. And I'm also responsible for some of the English-speaking consultations. So if you look over there, you might be talking with me. And
okay, just to spell it, please. Statenlos. Can you spell that?
Statenlos, STAA, Statenlos, TENLOS.ch, and perfect. So you can find also the English website there. And if you want to talk to me directly, I'm on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on all the social medias under @Fran FRAN Litvay LITVAY. So feel free to reach out also if you're, I don't know, going to Brazil, or if you're around here in Colombia, feel free to reach out.
It's going to be linked. It's going to be links for easier access. When somebody just like listening and click, they can remember. Okay, they can find Fran Litvay or Statenlos for the English version. If there's some final message you wanna share, now it's the time, because after that comes the question that I ask all the guests in this podcast, that I told you which one it is. So come prepared. But is there, first of all, any message, any last message you wanna, share with the world? Something that, if you had the opportunity to be in a billboard for 24 hours in Rio, or their big billboard, and it can say something in there, or a few words or a sentence, what you would put there for millions of people to see?
Come to Brazil. No,
drink mate.
No, no, drink mate. Come to Brazil. And
pretty solid billboard.
Just for all of this flag theory internationalization things that we've been talking about. It's interesting. It's a good world. Delve into it. Learn it. It's gonna be important for your life and for your family's life if we're talking about citizenship and wealth protection and so on. But don't get autistic over it. Don't don't major in the minor. Focus on the things that bring the most value, and don't spend 200 hours looking into optimization of hotel chains if you stay 5 nights in a hotel per year, right? Keep that in mind, right? Your time is also worth something, and it's usually worth more investing in yourself and your business than minor details that are going to give you one extra dispatched luggage or things like that, right? And always remember to tailor whatever you're hearing on Twitter and whatever to your personal situation. So if you're not American, the tax advice that people give to Americans, it's not the same for you, right? They have to account for a lot of different things with their citizenship, taxation, and the foreign earned income exclusion and so on. Don't listen to advice that's not meant for you, right? Or if you listen, adapt it to your situation, right? Don't just take it at face value. That's what the message I would like to give.
Beautiful. And something adding on top of that is learn from people who've done it. That's why what Francisco is sharing is valuable, because it's not something he just studied. It's something that he practiced and he is practicing, and he will get better and better and better and better. So always people who've done it before. Last question.
God willing.
Are you ready? You know which one it is. Who should be in this podcast next? What guest should we having here? Do you think would be a great fit?
I have a couple.
Which ones?
If you have not yet, invited him, Bowtied Mara. If you want to talk about Argentina, that man is the certified Argentina expert on Twitter and that whole Bowtie community, which I really like as well. If you want to talk about the topic of special economic zones and free ports and duty-free areas and autonomous regions and so on, there's 2 names I have for you. Maybe invite them jointly or separate podcasts. Preston Martin and Thibaut Surley, both from the Adrian Opal group. There's some podcasts out there with them. I'll send you a link if you like that kind of conversation. Nice. Very technical people, and also insane amounts of knowledge on these areas. So more interesting for businesses, more interesting for offshoring and these kinds of things. It's not going to be that much about nomadism and so on. But if you're for people that are on legit large businesses with employees and production and industry, or even just services, then there's a lot of wealth to be gained by not only just using the normal regimes that the countries offer, but the special regimes.
Beautiful. So all these names, then you send me.
I'll send them all on Telegram.
Yes, exactly. And then when I publish this episode, I will also show them. So I'm sure that they will be happy that you mentioned them on this episode. And hopefully we're going to have them here really, really soon. Francisco, thank you so much for your generosity, for your time once again. And yes, just keep sharing what you're sharing, man, because more people need to hear your message.
Thank you, Mikhail. It was a great pleasure to be here. And yeah, I'll be looking forward to the whole episode.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening up to this point. As you know, you can find more on Francisco, on everything that we shared here. And until the next episode, until then, be extraordinary. Adeu.